Detective Marcus Amaro stood motionless at the edge of the crime scene, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he surveyed the methodical chaos before him. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Boston had become the latest canvas for the killer the press had dubbed the Alchemist. The body of a young woman lay positioned with unsettling precision, surrounded by cryptic symbols drawn in a substance the forensics team was still analyzing. This was the fourth victim in 3 months. "Same signature?" asked Detective Rivera, Amaro's partner of 5 years, though he already knew the answer. "Down to the last detail," Amaro replied, kneeling to examine the strange markings without touching them. "The symbols are identical to the others, but arranged differently. He's communicating something." Boston's bitter February wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city. Amaro pulled his coat tighter as crime scene technicians photographed every inch of the grim tableau. The alchemist had struck again, and as with the previous scenes, there would be no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, only the taunting symbols that seemed to mock their investigation. "Captain's going to want an update," Rivera said, breaking the silence. "Press is already calling this the work of the alchemist again." Amaro nodded grimly. "Let forensics finish. I need to see if these new symbols tell us anything the others didn't." As the CSI team worked methodically around them, Amaro's mind drifted to the beginning of his career 15 years ago, to the case that still haunted his dreams. The Riverside Strangler had claimed 7 victims before vanishing without a trace. Amaro had been the lead detective, and the case remained unsolved. The similarities between that investigation and the current one were uncanny, feeding a gnawing suspicion that had been growing in his gut. Later that evening, as Boston's skyline faded into darkness, Amaro sat alone in his cramped office at police headquarters, walls plastered with crime scene photos and maps dotted with colored pins. His computer screen glowed with reports he'd read a dozen times already. 4 victims, 4 different neighborhoods, 4 different backgrounds. No clear connection except for the symbols and the meticulous nature of the killings. The shrill ring of his desk phone cut through his concentration. "Detective Amaro," he answered curtly. "Detective, there's someone here insisting on seeing you. A reporter named Sophia Reyes from the Boston Chronicle." The desk sergeant's voice carried a note of exasperation. "Says she has information about the alchemist case." Amaro sighed. Reporters had been swarming the department since the second murder, but something in the sergeant's tone gave him pause. "Send her up." Sophia Reyes was not what Amaro expected. Barely 30, with intense dark eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they saw, she carried herself with the confidence of someone twice her age. Her press credentials hung around her neck like a badge of honor. "Detective Amaro," she began without preamble, "I've been researching historical cases with similar MOs to the alchemist. I believe the symbols at your crime scenes are adapted from 17th century alchemical texts." She placed a folder on his desk. "And I think I might know why he's choosing these specific victims." Amaro's skepticism was immediate and visible. "Ms. Reyes, this is an active investigation. Whatever theory you've concocted for your next headline—" "It's not for a headline," she interrupted, opening the folder to reveal photocopies of ancient texts alongside crime scene photos she shouldn't have had access to. "The symbols aren't random. They're a formula, an alchemical process for transformation. Each victim represents a stage." Despite his instinct to dismiss her, Amaro found himself leaning forward. "How did you get these crime scene photos?" Sophia's expression remained neutral. "I protect my sources, detective. The question is, why didn't your department connect these symbols to historical alchemy? The killer isn't just leaving a signature. He's telling you exactly what he's doing and why." "And what exactly is that?" Amaro asked, his voice low and dangerous. "He's recreating an ancient ritual, one that requires 7 sacrifices." Her eyes locked with his. "You've found 4 victims. That means there are 3 more to come," unless you stop him. Delays, the implications hit Amaro like a physical blow. 7 victims, the same number as the Riverside Strangler case that had haunted him for 15 years. Before he could respond, his cell phone buzzed with a text from Rivera. 5th body found. North End. Same symbols. Captain wants you there now. Amaro's gaze snapped back to Sophia. How did you know there would be more victims? Because The Alchemist is following a script written centuries ago, she replied, gathering her materials. And if I'm right, you have exactly 6 days until the next murder. Amaro stood, grabbing his coat. This conversation isn't over, Ms. Reyes. I know, she said, handing him a business card. Call me when you're ready to hear the rest. The Alchemist is telling a story, detective. Once you understand it, you'll find him. As Amaro rushed toward the door, Sophia called after him. Detective, check the victim's left wrist. If there's a small puncture mark, surrounded by a perfect circle, I'm right about the ritual. Amaro paused, torn between professional protocol and the gnawing feeling that this journalist knew more than she should. Against his better judgment, he nodded once before disappearing into the corridor. The north wind had picked up by the time Amaro reached the latest crime scene, an abandoned church in Boston's historic North End. As he ducked under the police tape, Rivera approached, his expression grim. 5 victims now, Rivera said. And get this, the ME found a small puncture wound on the left wrist, surrounded by what looks like a perfectly circular bruise. Amaro felt a chill that had nothing to do with the February cold. The Alchemist is accelerating, he murmured, scanning the vaulted ceiling of the old church. And somehow, that reporter knew details we haven't released. What reporter? Rivera asked. Amaro's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. The next symbol will be Mercury, the metal that transitions between states. Time is running out. He looked up at the crime scene, where technicians photographed symbols identical to those in Sophia's ancient texts. For the first time since the investigation began, Amaro felt the killer's presence. Not just his handiwork, but his intelligence, his purpose, his message. And for the first time in 15 years, he felt the same dread that had consumed him during the Riverside Strangler case. The terrifying certainty that despite all his experience and methodology, he was always one step behind a killer who seemed to vanish into thin air. The Boston Police Department buzzed with frantic energy as Captain Wallace assembled the expanded task force. Amaro stood at the back of the crowded room, dark circles under his eyes betraying his sleepless night. 5 murders in 3 months, and now the press was in a feeding frenzy, dubbing it the worst serial killing spree in Boston's history. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit will be joining us tomorrow, Wallace announced, his voice carrying the weight of political pressure from above. Until then, I want every lead followed, every piece of evidence re-examined. The mayor's office is breathing down my neck, and I'm breathing down yours. Amaro, my office, now. As the meeting dispersed, Amaro followed Wallace into his glass-walled office, aware of the eyes tracking his movement. His reputation as the department's most methodical detective was being tested by this case, and everyone knew it. Tell me you have something, Wallace said as soon as the door closed. Anything. I've been cross-referencing the symbols with historical texts, Amaro replied, placing a file on the captain's desk. They're from alchemical manuscripts dating back to the 17th century. Each murder scene represents a stage in what alchemists called the Great Work, the transformation of base metals into gold. Wallace's expression darkened. And you figured this out how? Amaro hesitated. A journalist approached me, Sophia Reyes from the Boston Chronicle. She had information about the symbols that checked out. A journalist? Wallace's voice rose. You're collaborating with the press now. Not collaborating, Amaro countered. But she knows things about this case, things that weren't released to the public. She predicted details about the 5th victim before we found the body. Wallace leaned forward. Are you suggesting she's involved? No, Amaro said firmly. but she's been researching similar historical cases. She thinks the alchemist is following a specific ritual that requires 7 victims. 7. Wallace's face paled slightly, like the Riverside case. The unspoken connection hung between them. The Riverside Strangler, Amaro's first major case, the one that got away. 7 women murdered, and then the killer had vanished, leaving Boston to heal slowly from wounds that never fully closed. "I don't believe in coincidences," Amaro said quietly. "Neither do I." Wallace rubbed his temples. "What's the timeline?" "If the pattern holds, we have 5 days until the next murder." Wallace nodded grimly. "Talk to your journalist. Find out everything she knows. But Amaro—" His eyes narrowed. "Keep it official. I don't want any unauthorized sharing of case details. If she knows something relevant, bring her in formally." Amaro left headquarters and drove through Boston's slushy streets to the address on Sophia's card, a converted industrial loft in South Boston that housed the Chronicle's investigative team. He found her at a desk surrounded by stacks of books and printouts, her computer screen displaying images of ancient alchemical texts. "Detective," she acknowledged without looking up, "you found the puncture wound. How did you know it would be there?" Amaro demanded, pulling up a chair across from her. Sophia finally met his gaze. "Because I've been tracking similar cases across the country for the past decade. 3 in Chicago, 2 in Philadelphia, 4 in Seattle, all unsolved, all with the same alchemical signatures, all with 7 victims." Amaro felt his pulse quicken. "Why haven't these connections been made before?" "Because they were spaced years apart, and the local authorities never released the details about the symbols." She turned her computer screen toward him, showing a map with pins in different cities. "I only connected them because I was researching a book on historical influences in modern crime." "And now the alchemist is in Boston," Amaro said, studying her map. "Yes, but this time the pattern is accelerated. In the other cities the murders took place over years. Here it's been months." She leaned forward. "Something's different this time. He's in a hurry." Amaro considered her words carefully. "These other cases, they all stopped at 7 victims." Sophia nodded. "And the killer was never caught. After the 7th murder, the trail went cold." "Like he vanished into thin air," Amaro murmured, echoing the case's unofficial tagline. "Exactly." Sophia pushed a stack of photocopies toward him. "These are my research notes on all the connected cases. I think the alchemist is working towards something specific, a grand finale after the 7th murder." Amaro flipped through the pages, his detective's mind cataloguing the similarities, the patterns, the possibilities. "Why are you sharing this with me? Most journalists would kill for an exclusive like this." Sophia's expression hardened. "Because my sister was the 4th victim in Chicago, detective. I've been hunting this killer for 8 years. The revelation hung in the air between them, reshaping everything Amaro had assumed about her motivations. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Don't be sorry. Help me catch him." Her voice was steady, determined. "The 5th symbol represents Mercury, the element of transition, of change. In alchemy, it's the moment when the base metal begins to transform. If we're right about the ritual, the 6th and 7th murders will be different, more elaborate, more public." Amaro's phone rang, Rivera calling from headquarters. "We got something on the CCTV footage from near the church," his partner said without preamble. "A man in a dark coat, face never visible to the cameras. He's carrying what looks like a medical bag." "A doctor?" Amaro asked, his mind racing. "Or someone with medical knowledge?" The puncture wounds were made with surgical precision, according to the ME's preliminary report. Amaro glanced at Sophia, who was watching him intently. "Check databases for medical professionals with connections to the other cities where similar murders occurred. Focus on specialists who might have knowledge of historical alchemy or chemistry." "Already on it," Rivera confirmed. "There's something else. Forensics found microscopic metal particles in the wounds, different metals at each scene, corresponding to the alchemical elements in the symbols." Sophia's eyes widened at overhearing this detail. Amaro ended the call and turned to her. The metals, they're part of the ritual, aren't they? She nodded slowly. In traditional alchemy, each stage is associated with a specific metal: lead, copper, iron, tin, mercury, silver, and finally gold. The transformation isn't just symbolic, he's literally introducing these elements into the victims, which means he needs specialized knowledge and access to pure forms of these metals, Amaro concluded. That narrows our search. Sophia gathered her research into a folder and stood. I have contacts at universities who might be able to tell us more about modern practitioners of historical alchemy. Real researchers, not just occultists. I need to run this through official channels, Amaro warned her. No more solo investigation. Fine, she agreed, but I stay involved. I've been tracking this killer longer than anyone. As they left the Chronicle's offices, snow began to fall over Boston. Soft white flakes that would soon blanket the city in deceptive purity. Amaro couldn't shake the feeling that the alchemist was watching them, studying their movements, anticipating their next steps. In the parking lot, Sophia paused beside her car. Detective, there's something else you should know. In each city, the final victim was always connected to the investigation in some way. Amaro felt a chill run through him. Someone working the case? Or someone providing information, she said pointedly, like a journalist. Their eyes met in silent understanding as the snow continued to fall around them, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they were made, just as the alchemist had been doing for years, vanishing into thin air after completing his deadly ritual. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with snow still falling over Boston. Amaro arrived at headquarters to find FBI agents already set up in the conference room, their crisp suits and methodical efficiency creating a stark contrast to the local detectives' exhausted dishevelment. Special Agent Catherine Chen, the BAU team leader, wasted no time establishing her authority. "Detective Amaro," she greeted him with a firm handshake. "I've reviewed your case files. You've done solid work connecting the symbols to historical alchemy. We've been tracking similar cases for years, but the connections were tenuous until now." Amaro felt a mixture of vindication and frustration. "You knew about the other cities? Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle? We suspected they were connected, but couldn't prove it conclusively," Chen admitted. The time gaps between clusters were significant, and local jurisdictions were reluctant to share details that might cause panic. "Meanwhile, a killer has been perfecting his method across the country," Amaro said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Chen's expression remained neutral. "That's why we're here now. This is the first time he's accelerated his timeline so dramatically. 5 victims in 3 months instead of 7 over several years. Something's changed." The conference room door opened, and Captain Wallace entered with Sophia in tow. "Detective Ms. Reyes has been formally brought on as a consultant to the task force, given her research on the connected cases." Agent Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "A journalist?" "An investigative researcher who's been tracking these murders for 8 years, Sophia corrected, setting her files on the conference table. "And I have a theory about why the killer has accelerated his timeline in Boston." All eyes turned to her as she pulled up a presentation on her laptop, projecting it onto the wall screen. Each cluster of killings has corresponded with a rare astronomical event. In Chicago, it was a total solar eclipse. In Philadelphia, a Venus transit. In Seattle, a specific planetary alignment. She clicked to the next slide, showing a star chart. In exactly 9 days, Boston will experience a rare lunar eclipse that coincides with a particular planetary configuration, one that occurs only once every 84 years. If the alchemist is following the same pattern as before, the 7th murder will take place during this event. "That's why he's rushing," Amaro said, the pieces falling into place. "He needs to complete the sequence before the eclipse." "Exactly," Sophia confirmed, "and based on the historical texts, the final transformation, the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, must occur during the astronomical event itself. Agent Chen studied the star chart with narrowed eyes. This gives us a clear timeline. The sixth murder will likely occur within 48 hours, and the seventh on the night of the eclipse. We need to identify potential victims, Wallace interjected. If there's a pattern to his selections, now's the time to find it. Rivera, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, spoke up. I've been cross-referencing victims from all the connected cases. There's something interesting. Each victim had traces of metal in their system before death, corresponding to the metal of the previous victim. He's selecting people who already have these elements in their system? Amaro asked. Not naturally, Rivera clarified. These are unusual concentrations. The fourth victim in Boston had elevated levels of tin, which matches the third murder's metal signature. Sophia's expression changed as a new possibility dawned on her. He's preparing them in advance. The person who will become the sixth victim already has mercury in their system. Medical records, Amaro said, turning to Agent Chen. We need to search hospital databases for patients with unusual metal toxicity, specifically mercury. Already on it, Chen replied, nodding to one of her agents who was typing rapidly on a laptop. But we need to narrow the geographical search area. Amaro spread a map of Boston across the table. The murder locations form a pattern. He marked each crime scene with a red pin. It's a pentagram with the fifth murder at the top point. Which means the sixth will be here, Sophia said, placing her finger on the southeast point of the invisible pentagram. Near the harbor. And the seventh would be in the center, Agent Chen added, marking the middle of the pattern. Boston Common, the city's central public park. During a lunar eclipse with thousands of potential witnesses, Wallace said grimly, a public spectacle for his grand finale. The analysis was interrupted by a young FBI agent rushing into the room. We've got a hit on the medical record search. 3 patients admitted to Boston General in the past month with unusual mercury levels in their blood. 1 works at the harbor. The room erupted into action. Amaro and Sophia headed for his car, while Agent Chen mobilized her team. As they sped toward the harbor, wipers fighting against the thickening snow, Sophia stared out the window at the grey city rushing by. He knows we're onto him, she said quietly. In every city, when investigators got close, he accelerated the final murders, which means he has surveillance on the investigation somehow. Amaro replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Either direct access or a source inside. Or he's monitoring communications, Sophia suggested. Police radio, email, maybe even cell phones. Amaro's phone rang through the car's speakers, Rivera calling with an update. The harbor worker with mercury exposure is Martin Chen, 42, works in shipping container inspection. He called in sick today. Officers are at his apartment now, but there's no answer. Send his photo and address to my phone, Amaro instructed, and check if he had any recent visitors at work, someone who might have introduced the mercury. Already checked. Security footage shows a maintenance worker in his area 2 weeks ago, but the face is never visible to cameras, just like the church footage, Amaro muttered. He knows where the cameras are. They arrived at the harborside apartment complex as SWAT teams were setting up a perimeter. The building superintendent had confirmed that Chen's car was in its assigned spot, but there had been no movement from his unit all day. Agent Chen approached as Amaro and Sophia exited the car. We're ready to breach. Thermal imaging shows a single heat signature in the apartment, motionless. We may already be too late, Sophia said, her voice tight. The SWAT team moved with practiced efficiency, breaching the door with minimal noise. Within minutes, the all-clear came through, and Amaro followed Agent Chen into the apartment, Sophia close behind despite protocol. Martin Chen lay on his living room floor, positioned with the same ritualistic precision as the previous victims. Around his body were the familiar alchemical symbols, this time incorporating the sign for silver, the 6th metal in the sequence. On his left wrist was the telltale puncture wound, surrounded by a perfect circle. Time of death appears to be early this morning, the medical examiner said after a preliminary examination. Same MO as the others, but he hesitated. But what? Amaro pressed. The silver wasn't just introduced at the puncture site. It's throughout his system, administered over time. And there's something else. He pointed to a nearly invisible mark behind Chen's ear. Some kind of microchip was implanted and then removed post-mortem. The wound is fresh. Sophia and Amaro exchanged alarmed glances. He's tagging them, Sophia said, tracking them like animals. Or monitoring them, Amaro added, gathering data. As crime scene technicians processed the apartment, Amaro noticed something different about this scene. A small mirror positioned to reflect the body, placed at a precise angle to the window. The mirror is new, he said, careful not to touch it. It wasn't present at the other scenes. Silver, Sophia whispered. The metal for this stage is silver, and mirrors traditionally used silver backing. Agent Chen studied the mirror's placement. It's angled to catch the moonlight. Part of the ritual. Or a message, Amaro suggested, looking out the window to see what the mirror would reflect when moonlight struck it. The view lined up perfectly with Boston Common in the distance, the predicted location of the final murder. He's confirming our theory, Sophia said, telling us we're right about the 7th location. Or leading us exactly where he wants us to go, Amaro countered, the uneasy feeling in his gut intensifying. This is too easy. He's never been this obvious before. As they exited the apartment, Amaro pulled Sophia aside in the hallway. Something's not adding up. In the previous cities, did he ever leave such clear indicators of the next location? Sophia shook her head. Never. He was always careful to obscure his patterns until it was too late. So why telegraph the final location now? Unless... Amaro's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the same one that had contacted him before. Mercury transitions to silver. Silver reflects the truth. Look beyond the mirror. Sophia read the message over his shoulder. He's communicating with you directly now. Or someone who knows details of the investigation is, Amaro said, his suspicion growing. We need to check everyone who has access to the case files. Officers, agents, support staff, even the ME. Back at headquarters, tension hung in the air as the task force prepared for what everyone assumed would be the killer's final act. The investigation had shifted from reactive to preventive, mapping every inch of Boston Common, planning security deployments for the night of the eclipse, and analyzing the victims for any connection that might help identify the alchemist or his final target. Late that evening, as most of the task force had departed to get a few hours of rest before the next day's preparations, Amaro remained at his desk, reviewing security footage from all 5 murder scenes. Sophia sat across from him, equally engrossed in cross-referencing victim backgrounds. There has to be something connecting them besides the metals in their system, Amaro muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. Maybe we're overthinking it, Sophia suggested. In alchemy, the subjects of transformation are chosen for their inherent qualities, their potential to become something greater. Amaro looked up sharply. Their potential. He pulled up the victims' employment records. The first victim was a chemical engineer, the second a metallurgist, the third worked in industrial manufacturing, the fourth was a jeweler specializing in mixed metals, the fifth was a chemistry professor, and the sixth inspected shipping containers, specifically those carrying industrial metals and compounds, Sophia added, catching his train of thought. They all worked with metals in some capacity. He's not just selecting victims who have been exposed to the metals, Amaro realized. He's selecting people who understand transformation, who facilitate it in their daily work. Sophia's eyes widened as she made the connection. Then the 7th victim will be someone who represents the ultimate transformation, lead into gold, or someone who transforms people, Amaro said quietly. A doctor, a therapist, a teacher, or a detective, Sophia interrupted, meeting his gaze. Someone who transforms chaos into order, questions into answers. The implication hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. The alchemist's pattern suggested his final victim could be someone working on the very investigation meant to stop him, someone like Amaro himself. As if in response to this realization, Amaro's phone lit up with another message from the unknown number. The final transformation approaches. Not all who seek will find. Not all who find will understand. The Philosopher's Stone reveals itself only to the worthy. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, and a cold, clear night settled over Boston. Somewhere in the city, the alchemist was preparing for his final act, a ritual transformation under the blood-red moon of the coming eclipse. And despite all their preparations, all their insights, all their resources, Amaro couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something essential, that the killer who had vanished into thin air in 3 cities before was setting the stage for his most spectacular disappearance yet. The day before the lunar eclipse dawned clear and cold, Boston streets gleaming with fresh snow under a bright winter sun. At police headquarters, the Joint Task Force had transformed the conference room into a command center, walls covered with maps, timelines and profiles. Agent Chen stood at the center, briefing the assembled team on the night's deployment. We'll have officers at all entrances to Boston Common, plainclothes teams throughout the park, and surveillance covering every angle, she explained, indicating positions on the large map. The eclipse begins at 11:42 p.m. and reaches totality at 12:17 a.m. Based on previous patterns, we believe the alchemist will attempt to complete his ritual during the 35 minutes of the eclipse's progression. Amaro studied the deployment plan with a critical eye. We're making a big assumption that he'll follow the pattern we've identified. What if we're wrong about the location? We have teams monitoring all 5 previous crime scenes and the surrounding areas, Rivera assured him. If he deviates from the pattern, we'll pivot. And we've identified 17 potential victims based on the criteria we established, Wallace added. Each one has protective surveillance. If he targets anyone on our list, we'll know immediately. Sophia, who had been unusually quiet all morning, finally spoke. You're all missing something fundamental. The alchemist doesn't just vanish after his killings, he transforms. That's the whole point of the ritual. 7 murders, 7 metals, culminating in the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, the agent of perfect transformation. Meaning what exactly? Agent Chen asked, her skepticism evident. Meaning he becomes someone else, Sophia explained. Not just a disguise, but a complete change of identity. That's how he's evaded capture in 3 cities. He literally becomes a different person after completing the ritual. That's not possible, Wallace objected. People don't just transform into someone else. No, but they can transform their appearance, their documentation, their entire digital footprint, Amaro said, following Sophia's logic. We've been looking for connections between the cities where the murders occurred. But what if we should be looking at where he went after each series? Where did he emerge as someone new? A young FBI analyst raised her hand tentatively. I've been cross-referencing immigration and new resident records in major cities following each murder series. There's a spike in new arrivals in each case, but one pattern stands out. In each instance, a new medical professional established practice in a city approximately 1,000 miles from the murder location within 3 months of the final killing. Names, Amaro demanded. Different each time, but similar credentials, specialized training in both modern medicine and historical medical practices. Board certifications that check out, but employment histories that become vague when you dig deeper. Agent Chen's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. Do any medical professionals matching that profile arrive in Boston in the months before these murders began? The analyst nodded. Dr. Elias Morgan joined Boston Memorial Hospital's research staff 9 months ago, specialized in historical pharmacology and metallurgic healing practices. Impeccable credentials, but his previous employment records contain inconsistencies. That's him, Sophia said with certainty. The alchemist doesn't just kill, he studies transformation through death. A medical researcher would have the knowledge, the access to metals, and the ability to monitor his victims. And he'd know how to implant tracking devices, Amaro added. What's his current status? Rivera was already on the phone, then looked up with alarm. He called in sick 3 days ago. Hasn't been seen since. Find him, Wallace ordered. Now! As the task force mobilized to locate Dr. Morgan, Amaro pulled Sophia aside. There's something else we need to consider. If we're right about the alchemist's pattern, he needs a 7th victim who represents the final transformation, gold. Someone on the investigation, Sophia confirmed quietly. Someone who has been tracking him, trying to understand him. Like a detective, Amaro said. Or a journalist who's been hunting him for 8 years. Their eyes met in silent understanding. He's been watching us, Sophia said. The text messages to your phone, they're from him, which means he knows our plans for Boston Common tonight. Amaro ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We're not surprising him. He's leading us exactly where he wants us to go. So what do? Change the game, Amaro decided. If he wants one of us as the final sacrifice, let's give him what he wants, on our terms. As darkness fell over Boston, the lunar eclipse preparation took on a new dimension. While the official operation continued at Boston Common, Amaro and Sophia implemented their own plan, with Agent Chen's reluctant approval. Dr. Morgan's apartment had been found empty, with evidence that he had been living there until very recently. The perfect staging area for his final transformation. He'll be watching the Common, Amaro said as they set up in a vacant apartment across from Morgan's building, monitoring the police presence, maybe even communicating with someone inside the operation. But he needs to return here, Sophia continued. This is where his equipment is, where he's prepared for his final metamorphosis. The new identity is already waiting, papers, credentials, everything he needs to vanish again. They had positioned plainclothes officers throughout the neighborhood, but kept the circle small, only those they could personally vouch for. The possibility of a leak within the department or the FBI was too great to risk a larger operation. As the eclipse began, Amaro's phone lit up with another text. The moment approaches. The worthy will be transformed. The unworthy will bear witness. He's making contact, Amaro murmured, showing Sophia the message. Trying to confirm our location. Should we respond? She asked. No, let him wonder. Amaro checked his watch. 11:50 p.m. The eclipse was underway, the moon slowly disappearing into shadow. Minutes ticked by in tense silence. Reports came in from Boston Common. No suspicious activity, no sign of their target. Dr. Morgan's building remained quiet, its windows dark, except for the occasional resident moving behind blinds. At 12:10 a.m., just minutes before totality, movement caught Amaro's eye. A figure in a dark coat entering the building from a side entrance, moving with purposeful efficiency. That's him, Amaro whispered, already moving toward the door. Sophia followed, both of them drawing weapons as they coordinated with the plainclothes team via their earpieces. They crossed the street silently, using the deep shadows cast by the nearly eclipsed moon. The building's security door had been left unlocked, either by Morgan himself or by their surveillance team earlier. Apartment 3B, Amaro whispered as they climbed the stairs, avoiding the elevator. Teams in position at all exits? Confirmed, came the quiet response in his earpiece. They reached the 3rd floor, moving silently down the carpeted hallway. Outside apartment 3B, Amaro paused, listening. Faint sounds of movement came from within. Metallic clinks, glass clinking against glass. Amaro held up 3 fingers, counting down silently. On 0, he nodded to the officer positioned with the battering ram. The door crashed inward, and they surged inside, weapons raised. Boston Police FBI, don't move! Dr. Elias Morgan stood at a table covered with laboratory equipment, his back to them. He turned slowly, his expression not one of surprise but of calm acceptance. He was younger than Amaro had expected, perhaps 40, with aristocratic features and intelligent eyes. "Detective Amaro," he said with a slight nod. "Ms. Reyes, I've been expecting you." His voice was cultured, almost musical in its cadence. "Though I must admit I anticipated meeting at the Common, not here in my humble laboratory." "Elias Morgan," Amaro said, keeping his weapon trained on the man. "Or whatever your real name is. You're under arrest for the murders of 6 people in Boston and many more across the country." Morgan smiled faintly. 6 transformations, detective, not murders, each subject a necessary step toward the great work. "Call it what you want," Sophia said, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "You're a serial killer who's finally been caught." "Am I?" Morgan glanced pointedly at his watch. "The eclipse reaches totality in exactly 3 minutes. The moment of final transformation is still to come." Amaro moved cautiously closer, keeping his gun steady. "There won't be a 7th victim, it's over." "Is it?" Morgan's smile widened slightly. "Look around you, detective. What do you see?" For the first time, Amaro took in the full scene. The laboratory equipment, yes, but also the symbols drawn on the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The same alchemical symbols from the murder scenes, arranged in concentric circles around the room, and on the table beside Morgan's equipment, a small golden object about the size of a coin. "The Philosopher's Stone," Morgan said, following Amaro's gaze. "Nearly complete. Needing only the final catalyst, the 7th metal, gold, and the 7th transformation." "You won't find a 7th victim here," Sophia said firmly. "But I already have," Morgan replied, his eyes fixed on Amaro. "You've been carrying it with you all along, detective. Since the beginning." Confusion crossed Amaro's face. "What are you talking about?" "Your service weapon, detective. The bullet that's been in the chamber since you loaded it this morning. Check the manufacturer, Coldwell Specialty Metals. Their signature is a small percentage of gold in their law enforcement ammunition. A recent innovation meant to reduce barrel wear." Amaro felt a chill run through him as he realized Morgan was right. His department had switched to Coldwell ammunition the previous year. "The gold was never meant to be a person," Morgan continued. "It was always meant to be the instrument of transformation itself. Just as it was in Philadelphia and Seattle and Chicago before that." Realization dawned on Sophia's face. "The Riverside Strangler case. Your first serial killing. You left 7 victims there too." "My earliest work," Morgan acknowledged with a slight bow. "Less refined, but essential to my development, and it brought me back to Boston to complete the circle with Detective Amaro, the man who nearly caught me 15 years ago." "You wanted me on this case," Amaro said, pieces falling into place. "The texts, the clues, you were leading me here all along." "Of course. The ritual requires a worthy observer, someone who understands the transformation, even if they oppose it." Morgan glanced at his watch again. "Totality in 1 minute. The moment approaches." "Cuff him," Amaro ordered the officers who had entered behind them. "Read him his rights." As the officers moved forward, Morgan suddenly swept his arm across the laboratory table, sending glass vials crashing to the floor. A bright flash erupted as chemicals mixed, followed by billowing smoke that quickly filled the room. "Gas!" Amaro shouted, backing toward the door. "Everyone out!" In the confusion, officers scrambled to retreat while maintaining visual contact with the suspect. Amaro grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her toward the exit as the smoke grew thicker, but she broke away. "We can't let him escape again!" she cried, lunging toward where Morgan had been standing. A gunshot cracked through the apartment, Sophia's weapon discharging. There was a grunt of pain, the sound of breaking glass, and then more smoke, obscuring everything. "Sophia!" Amaro called, trying to peer through the thickening haze. "I'm here!" she coughed, emerging from the smoke. "I think I hit him, but I can't see." Backup officers were already forcing open windows, fans dispersing the smoke. As visibility slowly returned, Amaro and the FBI team searched the apartment methodically, room by room. Dr. Elias Morgan was gone. A broken window in the bathroom revealed his escape route, a fire escape leading down to an alley where, according to the officers stationed there, no one had emerged. "Check every building on the block," Agent Chen ordered through her radio. "He can't have gone far." But Amaro knew better. As the smoke cleared completely, he examined the laboratory table where Morgan had been working. The small golden object, the supposed Philosopher's Stone, was gone. In its place was a business card with a single word written on it: transformation. "He did it again," Sophia said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Vanished into thin air, just like before." Amaro stared at the card, turning it over in his gloved hand. Not completely. He pointed to a smear of blood on the corner of the table. "You hit him. For the first time in 15 years, the alchemist left something behind, his DNA." Outside, the lunar eclipse had reached totality, the moon glowing blood red in the night sky. As evidence technicians processed the scene and the manhunt expanded throughout the city, Amaro stood at the broken window, staring out at the transformed moon. "We'll find him," he promised Sophia, who had joined him at the window. "Maybe not tonight, but we have his real DNA now, his true identity. He can change his name, his appearance, his entire life, but he can't change that. Unless that's exactly what the ritual was meant to do," she replied quietly. "To transform him so completely that even his DNA is different." Amaro shook his head. "That's not possible. 6 months ago, would you have believed any of this was possible?" Sophia challenged. "A killer who studies alchemy, who tracks his victims with microchips, who times his murders to celestial events." Before Amaro could respond, his phone buzzed with a final text message. "The great work is complete. Until we meet again, Detective." The search for Dr. Elias Morgan continued for weeks, then months. His blood from the crime scene provided DNA that matched no known database. His fingerprints had been methodically removed, not just obscured, but surgically altered. His facial recognition was flagged at airports across the country, but no matches were ever confirmed. Like the alchemist before him in 3 other cities, Dr. Morgan had completed his ritual and vanished into thin air. 6 months later, in a small cafe in Chicago, Detective Marcus Amaro sat across from Sophia Reyes, reviewing their independent investigations into the case that still haunted them both. "There's a new oncologist at Johns Hopkins," Sophia said, sliding a photograph across the table. "Specialized in metal chelation therapy. Arrived 3 months after Boston. Different name, different face, but the same pattern." "We'll never stop looking," Amaro promised, studying the photo. "And next time we'll be ready for him." As they parted ways, continuing their separate but parallel hunts, neither noticed the man at the next table, a distinguished gentleman with silver at his temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He left a generous tip, gathered his medical journals, and stepped out into the bright summer day, vanishing into the crowd of a city that had once known him by another name, in another life, before his final transformation was complete.